What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy Royale YouTube channel. Today, we are giving you the best waiver wire pickups pre-Monday Night Football, but we're going to give you a head start on your waivers for this week. We're going to talk about all of the main positions, so quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends from NFL Week 2 to get you ready for NFL Week 3, and we are going to have some rostership on this screen, and so it's a good time to mention that we are sponsored by Sleeper, specifically Sleeper Picks. You can get up to a $100 first deposit match if you use the code the Devy Royale on Sleeper. Highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. I can't do it in Ohio, but Randy can, so it's a lot of fun. So go do that on Sleeper. Let's get into the waivers. So Derek Carr and the Saints in general are a lot better than I think I anticipated them being. He's only rostered in 20% of Sleeper redraft leagues. He only had 16 pass attempts in week 2, but he scored 22 fantasy points. He has an kind of an open matchup against Philadelphia where the secondary is a little iffy. It's really young. Do you think that Derek Carr can sustain his success in the passing game and be a good streamer this week?
MVP Derek Carr. Yeah, I do think it's a good matchup. Yeah, it's throwback to Raiders days.
It's crazy.
Eagles defense, like you said, young secondary mixed with some vets. They played good and bad already this year so far. We'll see how they look tomorrow to kind of get a better judge of it. But I do think it sets up for a game for if the Saints have any chance to be close, they have to be led by Derek Carr. We know the bodies that the Eagles have in the interior there. While Kamara and the short attacks looked pretty decent the first 2 weeks here, I think those were plus matchups. I don't see it being a plus matchup next week, although Kamara will still be a good play with all the dump-offs. But Carr is consistently hitting deep shots to Shaheed and everyone else, it seems like. And this week, Olave finally got more involved with a full game being able to play this week. And Carr looks confident and good. I don't think this is necessarily a good team overall, but they're playing very well to start the year.
Yeah, I've been just impressed with their inspired play calling. I think they're using their personnel really, really well. They're doing things that Derek Carr is good at. I think he probably took some offense to people talking about Jay Kaner and Spencer Rattler this offseason too, because he likes to pocket that and have some locker room material. It's showing through 2 weeks thus far. Yeah, we'll see once the competition gets a little bit tougher. Sam Darnold is the other one on the quarterbacks list from the Minnesota Vikings, also only rostered in 20% of Sleeper redraft leagues. In week 2, 17 of 26, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, 18.9 fantasy points. Gets a tough Houston team in week 3, but I think you can argue that Darnold has played some tough teams already, and he's been good. And maybe not the Giants. They don't really count as a tough team. But the 49ers defense was expected to be pretty good. He looked really comfortable out there. There was one big it wasn't even a broken play. It's just Justin Jefferson running behind the defense that contributed to a lot of these yards. But overall, I've been impressed with Darnold's command of this Vikings offense. I think if you're looking for a streaming quarterback, I think I'd rather Carr, but if you miss out on Carr, I'd be pretty comfortable putting Darnold in my lineup next week.
Yeah, they've just been consistent over the last 2 weeks, whether, the Giants isn't a tremendous defense, where they have some young guys in the secondary and a really good defensive line. So he's faced the pressure these last 2 weeks, faced a better defense than the 49ers and put up similar stats. I think it's a comparable defense this week against Houston, but he should return another good output, and he's been consistent and pretty safe. He's getting – both these quarterbacks are getting along, the last few years of like Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, where you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm not getting the QB1, but I'm happily as a waiver wire pickup for the week getting a QB 10 to 14.
Yeah, and this might end up being – a better streaming option. And Jordan Love's out for a little while now. They've kind of confirmed that he's targeting week 5. So if you didn't go out and you didn't pick up like Geno Smith or Baker Mayfield, like we talked about last week, and you wound up with someone else, these could be some options for you heading into next week. Over to the running backs. We have 2 here, Braylon Allen and Carson Steele. Braylon Allen Just 7 attempts, 33 yards, a touchdown, and then 2 receptions for a touchdown as well. 19.6 fantasy points. Only rostered in, once again, 20% of sleeper redraft leagues. Gets a tough matchup against New England, but the reason I think he's a pretty good add is I actually think that Allen's going to get a little bit more work against a physical Patriots defense over someone like Brees Hall. I think maybe Allen gets a lot of those short yardage carries, and Allen looks pretty explosive out there, so he could break one of those. I don't know if he's earned more involvement, but his snaps seem to be increasing week 1 to week 2, and I wouldn't be shocked if it happens again in week 3.
Yeah, I mean he performed well today for sure in limited attempts. I mean 9 touches, 2 touchdowns, that's pretty good. Obviously he still doesn't look like the best back in the team, but that's not what we're going after here. We're going after just a waiver wire ad for possible upside and flex play down the stretch here. But this team is going to continue to rely on the running game and these 2 running backs to carry a veteran, Aaron Rodgers, so he's not having to do everything. So I do think it's a good season-long kind of stash if you can. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable playing him. The Titans weren't a good rush matchup for sure this week, and I kind of showed with both running backs stat lines necessarily. It's a little bit better matchup running the ball specifically against the Patriots, but an overall defense, not really. So we'll see. I think they'll rely on the 2 running backs this week, so I think he's playable, depending, very depending.
Yeah, I wanted to start with Allen because I actually prefer Carson Steele, 4% rostered on Sleeper. For those that don't know, this is the Chiefs' backup running back at this moment, and Isaiah Pacheco left the stadium today in a walking boot and on crutches. So Steele did see some additional work, 7 attempts, 24 yards. He did have a goal line carry in this game. So they gave him a scoring opportunity. He's kind of been their pseudo fullback and backup running back. Gets an Atlanta matchup that I think is fairly difficult. I think Atlanta's defense is a little bit underrated, especially their run defense. But I think Steele, people are going to debate Steele or Pirine. And while I think Pirine probably gets a little more third down work, I do think that Steele is probably the better back to have in this game where I believe the Chiefs can control the game. Steele could get, a lot of second half carries. I think Steele's a really good ad this week.
Yeah, again, and this is entirely dependent on Pacheco, but because it's waivers, we're not going to really know anything going into Tuesday. So I think he's, again, a good stash ad, and just kind of hope that in this case Pacheco would be out and Steele is at least going to get, a dozen or so touches. And I think with this offensive line going up against Atlanta, I think he can be kind of efficient, and he would be the only goal line back for this team. So there's upside there, at least getting a floor of 6 points, hopefully.
Yeah, and an upside of like 18 to 20 because I think the Chiefs' offense will be, firing on better cylinders than they were firing on against the Bengals. So, yeah, we hope so. The early season Mahomes stuff is starting to become a thing. I don't know if you remember last year, but this was he has some dumb interceptions. So hopefully the Chiefs can get it together. But moving on to the wide receivers, the first one we want to talk about is Quentin Johnston from the Los Angeles Chargers, only 17% rostered in sleeper redraft leagues. Week 2, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 22 fantasy points. He does get a fairly difficult matchup against Pittsburgh, but Justin Herbert is no stranger to tough defenses. And so that type of matchup doesn't really scare me much. I think the Steelers corners have played well at times, but I also think they are a bit untested at this moment. Outside of they did a good job with Drake London. I wouldn't, Kirk Cousins wasn't really firing on any cylinders in that week 1 performance. So I think Quentin Johnston, if you look at the first 2 weeks, his target share is up. I think this is a player that you can put into your flex most weeks and just hope for a stat line like this where he finds the end zone. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think him and Lad McConkey are in the same line right now. I know Lad led the target share last week, Quentin this week. I think this isn't a high volume passing attack, so this is the kind of stat line you're looking for as a top end play for these guys. But the biggest thing with Johnston is being incorporated in the offense and building the confidence back up. And there's not much more that can do better for your confidence than 2 touchdowns.
Yep. Yeah, and he looked good. I mean, he looked really good out there. So, so yeah, I think he's probably the best ad, but it's worth noting that we're going to talk about these Rams wide receivers. Cooper Kupp left the game injured. Puka Nacua is already hurt. Demarcus Robinson is rostered in 54% of sleeper leagues. So, if he's available in your league, I would say Demarcus Robinson is the player to add. But Tyler Johnson was really close in snaps. And so if you miss on Demarcus Robinson, you can probably target Tyler Johnson and get similar output. I would say tough matchup against San Francisco, but we just saw Sam Darnold do a number on that defense. So I guess, do you prefer Robinson or Johnson, Randy?
I mean Robinson because there's already like a couple year connection with Stafford here. This team's going to continue to throw the ball. It
Hmm.
just will, and it's not a great rushing matchup against San Francisco this week. So I definitely would want the passing game of this. I think I would rather Robinson, but with 54%, I think it's just you have to say Johnson and
Hmm.
just hope. But he has looked good. I will say Whittington has looked good as well at times. Parkinson uptick we saw this week as well. I would just, if you have an open bench spot, it's worth a shot of taking one of these wide receivers from the Rams, especially because we know Puka is out at least 4 weeks, if not like 6 or 7. There's a good chance Cup is out this week, if not a couple more. So the guy that came on the scene late last year is Robinson. That's who I'd want, though.
Yeah. Yeah. If he's available, I think that's the route to go. I did put on one honorable mention this week, Jalen Naylor. Justin Jefferson left the game hurt. He It's not a serious injury, and he said he'll be back. But Jordan Addison was also out of this game. Jalen Naylor had a good game. And so I think if Jefferson is a little bit banged up, even if Addison comes back, Naylor is probably a decent flex play next week. I think that once again, this Minnesota offense is firing on a lot of cylinders. I keep saying that, but I think they're doing a good job. Kevin O'Connell is scheming up a really good offense. I think Naylor can plug into your lineup this week. Over to the tight ends, Hunter Henry. Of course, this is the one for this week, 22% rostered on Sleeper. Week 2, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 109 yards, 18.9 fantasy points. Does get a tough matchup against the Jets, and I am slightly concerned that the Patriots won't be able to pass at all against the Jets, if only because that second half and overtime was really, really rough. I think Henry's usage probably remains for as long as Brissett is the quarterback. I don't know how much longer we're going to get that. I think we'll get a few more weeks of that at least. So I think Henry's a good, if you're scrounging for tight ends, which many people are with the current state of the position, I think Henry's a fine plug and play type of option for a few weeks here.
Yeah, I think he always kind of is. This is
Yeah.
definitely one of his like explosive games, but
Yeah.
he didn't get in the end zone. And the last 2 years he's been good for 2 or 3 to 5 catches for like 40 yards and a touchdown. So this is
Mhm.
definitely a big game. The offense looked better, just running through him as well. He looked like a safe option. I do think linebackers for Seattle maybe not best coverage, but I also don't think the Jets have that kind of talent there either. Their talent lies in the secondary and D tackle, really. So I do think Hunter Henry can keep it up. I do think it's kind of funny how our mock draft episode, you struggled with tight ends and you had to take them late. And the 3 we talked about, Isaiah Likely, Colby Parkinson, and Hunter Henry, have been 3 of the better tight ends through the first 2 weeks.
Jordan Mason made his way onto that as well. So
Yes, he
we've
did.
that was a solid last few
And
rounds
Tank
there.
Bigsby.
Yeah, Tank Bigsby did make it as well. Um, all right, the last tight end. This one's a little bit of a caveat because Mike Gesicki from the Bengals, 9 targets in week 2, 7 receptions, 91 yards, only rostered in 10% of leagues, and I think that's justifiable, and it still might be. I think this is more of a speculative ad at tight end because Mike Gesicki actually was 3rd on the team in tight end snaps this week. He's in a full-fledged tight end rotation. But there's a chance that T. Higgins doesn't come back, and Gesicki is a good receiving threat. I think they see this performance, maybe get him on the field a little bit more against a Commanders defense that I think that they can take advantage of. This is more speculative, though. I probably wouldn't start Gesicki this week, if only because I'm not sure if he, Drew Sample, or Eric Hall are going to be on the field. And I hope that it's Gesicki to catch the passes, but you never know. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that also is incorporated in Gesicki's not a good blocker. So he
yeah,
was definitely, he's probably among one of the higher percentages of, targets throughout runs of the week. And I think that'll continue. Chase has looked a little sloppy to start the year, looks frustrated out there. Who could
yeah,
tell why? And it seems like the same thing's going on with Higgins, where people are even starting to act like he's faking his injuries. It's not a great scene in that wide receiver room right now, even though it's so probably the most talented, if not second or third. So Gesicki being somebody that's out there getting targeted every time he's out there, and he had a good week last week as well, especially since the NFL said his touchdown should have counted. He would have basically the same amount of points in 2 straight weeks. He'd be a tight end 1 right now, and I think that's valuable.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're correct about that. Targets per route run, by the way. I think it's 0.43, which has to be up there among tight ends. So it's really, really high. Okay, that'll do it for this waiver episode. We hope this is helpful to you. We hope you are winning your fantasy leagues because of the things that we are advising you to do on this channel. And if so, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like this video and make sure you share it with your friends. Also, shameless plug, we have a new NFL draft focused podcast called Quarters that you can go download and subscribe to and review, and you can go listen to us talk about the NFL draft. So if you're interested in that type of content as well, search up Quarters on your favorite podcast app. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.